Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. Jayson, Timpf, and I are just about ready to talk about the Lakers. Before we start with Jayson, I want to grab your smartphone, download the Gametime app. Grab it right now. That smartphone, 90 seconds, Gametime app. Want to go to a basketball game? Download Gametime. Use the code Colin, C-O-L-I-N. That's an easy code to remember. $20 off your first purchase. Gametime is fast and easy to use. By the way, if you show up, Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the event and even an hour after it starts. All right, it's the best place for last-minute deals. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110%. You take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app. It's really quick. It's 90 seconds like all these apps. You create an account. The code is Colin then, C-O-L-I-N, and you get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, an account, the redeem code Colin. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Well, we haven't talked to Jayson Timpf in a long time. Jayson is one of those gems we found hunting through podcast after podcast. Hoops Tonight host. He's done just a remarkable job for us. His growth has been exponential. And we don't ignore him during the football season, but we got Middlecoff here as my lead back. So now we're pivoting here in about 4 or 5 days to the NBA. And I found myself about 3 weeks ago really starting to watch the NBA. And Jayson and I are going to cut it up for about 45 minutes. Let me start with a trade deadline. A lot of times there can be sort of overhyped trade suggestions. I have not seen any irresponsible reporting by NBA guys. I don't think there's a ton out there. I think DeJounte Murray would make the Lakers better. I don't think he's a game changer. So your thought on what is a pretty quiet trade deadline?
Well, it's interesting because I think the play-in tournament has made it so that more teams than ever are more willing to think within the scope of the current season, which has diminished the number of sellers. And yet there are so many teams that feel close, which has increased the number of buyers. But the problem is the majority of those buyers don't have much to offer. Like the Milwaukee Bucks and the Phoenix Suns would love to have a perimeter defense upgrade, but they don't have any first-round picks to offer, which severely limits their ability to go out and get somebody. The Lakers would love to go out and get an athletic guard, but they have some limitations in that they basically have this one draft pick to offer, and chances are you can't get a really great transformative player for that type of talent. And so in a weird way, even though there are a lot of teams that would like to make a trade, there just aren't that many trades to be made. And so I think that will kind of limit what we see over the course of the next couple of days. Of course, you never know. We'll see what happens before the deadline if desperation kicks in and some stuff starts flying around. But I have a feeling that we're poised for a relatively quiet deadline.
So you follow the entire league. Let's start with the Lakers because that's always been a primary asset of your NBA knowledge. I've kind of rolled my eyes at any suggestion to trade LeBron, mostly because the 5 previous years before him, they had the lowest winning percentage in the league, and he saved the franchise. Ticket sales, merch, intelligence, he's still an elite scorer and distributor. I'm not giving up LeBron for 19-year-olds that may or may not hit and be players. Here's what I view the Lakers as, and you can tear this apart. I view this team as an elite scorer and distributor, LeBron, the best defender in the league in Anthony Davis, an excellent third wheel, sometimes inconsistent, but a good scorer in Austin Reeves, excellent length. That's why they can match up with a Denver. They have excellent length. Could use another shooter. I would love to see him give up a little length to get a shooter, DeJounte Murray. Then I think they would be in the discussion as the third best team in the league. They're not Boston, though the Celtics have no bench, and they just beat them. And they're not Denver. If Jokic, Anthony Davis does about as good a job as you can on him, and he's going to give you 28, 8, and 8 or whatever. But I think the move is a tweak, and I don't think I'm selling the future when I don't know, because of the way the NFL draft works, I get 23-year-olds. In the NBA, I get 19-year-olds. Who knows what they become? I have a much greater sense of a first-round NFL pick than a first-round NBA pick. So my take is, if you could get a shooter, give up a tad length, I think you're arguably capable of beating a Milwaukee, a Phoenix. Is that a fair kind of view of the Lakers?
The Lakers have had such a weird season, but it makes a little bit more sense when you kind of split it into thirds. So they come out the gates and they're actually pretty solid. In spite of the fact that D'Angelo Russell and Austin Reeves are both struggling, they started 15-9, capped off with winning the in-season tournament, right? Then immediately after that, which was somewhat, I was our mutual friend Logan Swaim, I was texting him at the time. I was like, I hope they don't just completely fall apart after winning this thing. They go 3-10 over their next 13 games with some bad losses. They lost to a Spurs team that hadn't won in like a month. They lost to the Bulls. They lost to the Grizzlies. They basically let go of the rope, and it does a ton of damage to them in the standings. Well, they kind of circle the wagons and they get their feet back underneath them, and they're 10-6 in their last 16 games with some impressive wins. They beat the Clippers. They beat the Thunder. They beat the Celtics. They beat the Knicks. They beat the Mavs. They beat the Warriors. So I think, more or less, I'm kind of exactly where I was with this team before the season, which is they're really damn good, but they're not as good as Denver. They're not as good as Boston. And so I think the silver lining and the reason why I would invest in this group is you and I talked about how LeBron and AD in a lot of ways needed to get better, especially on the offensive end, for them to be able to hang with Denver. A LeBron James jump shot last year was worth 0.9 points. A LeBron James jump shot this year is worth 1.06 points. That's an 18% improvement. You've seen that when you watch the games. He's executing the Golden State Warriors with pull-up jump shots at the end of games. He just was completely incapable of doing that last year. He had a bizarre shooting slump in last year's season. And then Anthony Davis is having the best post-up season of his career.
Yes.
He's reading double teams better than ever. And so to me, he's been so good. And so to me, like, you mentioned that core three, Austin, LeBron, and AD. The biggest question mark for the Lakers is the two guys in between. D'Angelo Russell brings a lot of offensive firepower to the table, but you can't play him next to Austin Reeves against good teams. You're not athletic enough in the backcourt. Taurean Prince has been Darvin Ham's favorite player all season long. He is a bench player. Here's a crazy stat for you. He has started twice as many games this year as he did in the previous 3 seasons combined. So he's miscast as a starter on this particular team, although they just recently moved him to the bench. Your opinion there, that bench length, they have all these guys like Rui Hachimura and Jared Vanderbilt who are really good, but they can't really play on the perimeter on both ends of the floor the way they need. And so, bringing in someone like a DeJounte Murray, another guy that they wanted last summer that they didn't get, who I know they're looking for again this year, is like a Bruce Brown, or even like a smaller move on the margins with a team like Brooklyn for something like Royce O'Neal and Dorian Finney-Smith. Getting quality NBA starters at the 2 and 3 will give them their best puncher's chance. But at the end of the day, Colin, like, is Denver just better than everybody? Because that, I think, is what's causing a lot of the reticence here, is whether or not they can even beat them.
I talked about this on the Herd today. If you look at the history of the NBA, teams have been very even. Those Utah-Chicago series, very even. What was the difference? Michael hitting key shots. Spurs dynasty was largely Duncan hitting key shots. Shaq and Kobe beat the Blazers in Game 7 on a series of great shots late. Lakers, I would argue, were outplayed for much of that series, trailed in several games. So if you look at the history of the NBA, the best player wins. It's not always the best bench. Denver's bench is average. It's not always the best support system. Michael Porter in the finals, he's been such a hit and miss, up and down player. Jokic just makes big baskets late. And so I don't think the Lakers are worse than Denver and Boston for any other reason than the best player on the floor. So Boston, I'm going to transition to them in a second. I still have my misgivings about Boston because I don't love their best player as much as I love Denver's or the Lakers or Milwaukee's. But I tend to think the Lakers are the third best team because Jokic is the world's best player. And I do think that a Celtics starting 5 is really, really good and usually good at home. So let's pivot to the East Coast. We'll come back west because I'm starting to fall in love with the Clippers, and that sentence I've never uttered in my life. But I want to go first. Let's go to Boston. So listen, I know their starting 5 is great. I don't love Mazzulla. I think he's a little over his skis at times in big games against Spoelstra, in big games against Malone. I wouldn't trust him in a big series. I think he gives away a game in a series. They don't have a bench. I do really like their starting 5. I think Porzingis is just a unique body. It's he's just hard to match up with. He forces you to pay attention to their fourth best player, and he's a weird body type. But I see this is that we're trying to convince ourselves to what Tatum is. I know exactly what Porzingis is. Not a great leader, not always healthy, but a very effective scorer and a unique body type. Drew Holiday, elite scorer, B-level scorer, elite defender, B-level scorer. Jalen Brown, great athlete, better every year, a little bit of a star ceiling, but an excellent player. With Tatum, it's different. I think people think, listen, next year he's Kobe. And this year and I'm like, no, he's never going to be that. That's not his personality. He is an A player, a top 8 guy in the league, but he doesn't have a little bit of that kind of get me the ball. I'm going to be selfish for 6 minutes. It's not in him. It's why he's a terrific team player. But I think we keep waiting for the next level of Tatum. And I'm like, he's a two-way player. Excellent. Love him. Team guy. But this is what he is. There will be game 6s and 7s when he's on the floor with a LeBron or Steph, and you're like, he's the second best player on the floor. He's just not that player. Is that an unfair appraisal of Jayson Tatum and the Celtics?
It's so funny because you can't talk about this with Celtics fans because their record is incredible. They have all these boxes that they're checking, and it's like this looks like the best team in the league. Except for guess who their last 4 losses were against? The Lakers, the Clippers, the Bucks, and the Nuggets. and specifically those 4 games, their offense faltered in every single one of those games. And the bizarre thing with this Celtics team is they have attached their fate to variance. They attempt the most 3-point shots in the league. When they're going in, they look awesome. When they're missing, their offense completely stutters and they can be beat by anybody, basically. Yeah. And even Jayson Tatum himself, and this is the most disappointing thing to me. He came into this season, he put on more muscle. He's one of the most physically impressive forwards that we have in the league. And he comes into the season, he's posting up more than ever. And then somewhere after 20 games or so, he stopped posting up as much and he went all in on this stupid pull-up jump shot, which has now become a half of his shot diet. This is a crazy stat for you, Colin. There are 9 players in the NBA that have attempted at least 400 pull-up jump shots this year, okay? Trae Young, a small guard. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, a finesse guard. Jalen Brunson, a smaller power guard. Steph Curry, a smaller guard. Devin Booker, a decent-sized 2 guard, but who's not a great athlete. Donovan Mitchell, good athlete, but he's small. Luka Doncic, a forward who is more ground-bound and doesn't have elite athleticism. And then Anthony Edwards and Jayson Tatum. So all these other guys, they do it because they have to. That's how they're in the NBA. And not to mention, all of those guys, Trae, SGA, Jalen, Steph, Devin Booker, Donovan Mitchell, Luka Doncic, they're all great at that shot. They get more than a point per pull-up jump shot that they take. The problem is Jayson Tatum, and by the way, Anthony Edwards has to be lumped in here because he's the same type of guy, disgustingly good athlete, just a ridiculous athlete who bails the defense out by taking these long pull-up jump shots. And Jayson Tatum, about a half of his shot diet is a shot that is worth less than a point, which is his pull-up jumper. For years now, he's never been able to make it at a high enough clip, yet he is attaching his destiny to it. And it's discouraging because, again, he is 6'9", ripped, freak athlete, can bully people to the basket, do all of this stuff, and he's bailing the defense out more often than not. And it's so funny. It used to be like a Tatum's young, he's figuring it out. Tatum's young, he's figuring out. He's going to be 26 in this playoff run. This is usually the time when players figure it out. Now, I don't want to bail on him because I've seen enough. They're in game, 5 and 6 against the Heat. He kind of looked like he started to figure some stuff out before he got hurt in game 7. It's not over for him by any stretch of the imagination, but it's just discouraging for a player this deep into his career with the athletic tools that he has to basically cut everyone a break by taking such high difficulty shots that he can't make at a high enough clip to really punish defenses. And between that and then as a team, them leaning so heavily on 3-point variance, they've made themselves beatable in a way that a team that talented really should not be beatable.
Looking for a super offer for Super Bowl 58? DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered. New customers can bet the big game. Bet just $5. That's it, $5, and get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Takes about 90 seconds. Use the code Colin. Colin. New customers bet $5, get $150 instantly in bonus bets for the big game. DraftKings, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Remember, redeem code Colin, Colin. The crown is yours. Okay, so I want to go back west to the Clippers, who I saw dismantle the Celtics in Boston from the opening tip. So a couple of nights ago, I'm out, and Lawrence Frank is sitting next to me, and we just chop it up for an hour. And I said, man, was I wrong on that deal? I said, I hated it. I'm like, what are you going to do with Westbrook? He went to the bench, where he's playing about 23 minutes a night and doing really good things in that 23 minutes. Last night, he had a couple of beautiful passes against the Hawks. Kawhi and Paul have always tremendous two-way wings. They've got size, Plumlee, they've got some size. But I said, you're a beautiful team to watch. The ball movement, they don't have a single player in the top 35 in ball usage, and you can see it. I think they're the most beautiful basketball right now in the league to watch. Jayson, the Clippers ball movement, they get a great shot 3 out of 4 times down the floor. They get beautiful shots. They have surging offense with like a Coffey and a Westbrook off the bench. Size, experienced wings, veteran point guard, experienced head coach. And I'm sitting there watching them. I know it's the Hawks, and I know the Celtics probably. No, I'll give them the win over the Celtics. That's a credible win. And I'm watching those two games, and I'm like, this offense, you can score your way to a title. There's no Tim Duncan in this league now. Like, you can score your way to a title. Jokic is not a great defender. Milwaukee's not a great defensive team. I think we have to take the Clippers seriously. I think they're a machine offensively. Westbrook deserves credit, and Harden, Lawrence Frank said right now in his career, all about winning. Most coachable guy. So your takeaway on what you're watching with him?
I think with James Harden, we overestimated, I think, going into that deal, how much like his playoff shortcomings really play a role in the regular season, which is they don't. Like, James Harden is still, even last year in Philly, one of the best regular season offensive engines that you can have in the league. That specifically is of great value next to Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, because they are both very much tip of the spear type of scorers. If you can get them into advantage situations, they can kill people. Paul George has been playing with like a defender closing out at him most of the season this year. And he's so damn good when you give him that type of advantage, right? And just in general, their overall floor organization with James Harden has just made offense so much easier for them, which was interesting because early on they struggled offensively with James Harden. That took a little bit of time for them to figure out. Now the offense is clicking in addition to the defense, and now they're beating everybody. The other part of it too is when we really look at the Clippers as a regular season team, they've been more on like the Lakers side in years past, where they're kind of just getting through the regular season. And one of the things that NBA history has told us is Denver Nuggets 1 seed, Warriors before Steph Curry sprained his foot, right there with the Suns at the top of the West, the Bucks 1 seed, the Lakers 1 seed, the Raptors a 2 seed. Like, the team that is a veteran team that has talent, that attacks the regular season with like a real ferocity, usually wins the title. And so the Clippers, I think, just from the top down, have approached the season with a lot more urgency this year. And I think that that's a big step in the right direction for them. Now, I want to be clear. There's some question marks surrounding this team. They're 23rd in defensive rebounding. That's usually a big red flag for the playoffs. They also attempt 26 pull-up jump shots per game, which is the second most in the league. And right now they're making them at a really high rate, but we've seen what happens when they lost to Denver in the bubble. That's what happened. Their pull-up jump shots went cold, and they didn't really have another punch at that point. But to be clear, all these teams have holes. Boston has offensive issues. Milwaukee has defensive issues. So it's not like the Clippers' issues are, the only team in the league that has that type of red flag. But the way I look at it, it's one last thing on the James Harden front that I think we didn't properly account for. In Philly, he was getting the best perimeter defender every night. Tyrese Maxey was viewed as the secondary option. They're throwing the forwards at Joel Embiid. He's getting the best guy on the other team at guarding a perimeter initiator. Who are you throwing your best guy at for a perimeter weapon with the Clippers? You're probably throwing it at Kawhi. Who are you throwing your second best guy at? You're probably throwing it at Paul George. James Harden is getting quality matchups every single night. I think just in general, there's lower pressure on him in this postseason. If you actually look back, last season, they were below 500 in the regular season and in the playoffs when James Harden shot below 40%. They did not have that margin for error in Philly for James to have a bad night. With the Clippers this year, they're well above 500 when James Harden shoots below 40%. There's margin for error. James can go off the reservation and they just keep trucking right along. And so I think they just kind of increased their margin for error. They improved their regular season offensive organization. But once again, it will come down to Kawhi and Paul George knocking down pull-up jump shots when they get into the postseason.
Yeah, and then Westbrook comes off the bench where he's often the best guard on the floor. When he comes in at the 8-minute mark, he's only playing like 23 minutes a night. But first of all, he's always been an energy guy. I'm never worried about that. But I think he deserves credit. He just said, listen, Carmelo really struggled to adapt to his role off the bench for like 3 years. Westbrook's like, I'll do it. And when Terrence Mann's your fourth best starter in the starting five, you're like, that's a good team. I think it's a really brilliant point. They're a little bit of a matchup issue. So because Kawhi and Paul George are very similar, I think Paul's the most underrated player in the league. He gets this whole playoff P, and then you go look at his playoff numbers. They're not bad at all. They're not bad at all. So I think he's a really underrated player. And he and Kawhi are very similar players. So you have to pick your poison. And if you start looking like the other night, and Kawhi is still such an effective player because of his hand size down low. He's really a problem. He's so strong. Paul's more of a pure perimeter player. Kawhi can go inside. I think they're just a matchup problem. I think they're a matchup problem with Westbrook off the bench, and I love watching them play. So let's go back east to the Knicks. So I watched the entire game, Lakers-Knicks. Now, OG didn't play in Randall. But, the Lakers beat the Celtics without LeBron and AD. So Julius Randle shouldn't be the difference. I think Grimes was out. But my takeaway on the Knicks is this. First of all, I always thought Jalen Brunson was a 1A. Maybe he's a 1. 27 a game. I love his leadership, his IQ, his toughness. I think he's the best Knick since Ewing. Was never a huge Carmelo fan. Didn't give you anything on the defensive end. And a little bit selfish. Wouldn't step back and hit threes for years. He just got stubborn on the twos. So if Brunson's an A, I do believe you need a very strong 2. I think OG and Randall are 3s. Good 3s. And at the end of that game, if Brunson's not hitting, forget Randall. Because Randall would be slowed down by AD. He's not getting any cheap points. AD's the best low post defender in the game. And I look at the Knicks, and what I've seen, Jayson, in the last 3 years with them is patience. And part of me is like, just go get a 2. And then part of me is like, no, that's the Knicks. You've been desperate. Amari Stoudemire. You always reach on people. Is there a player in the league, if not this trade deadline, next trade deadline? Because I think they need a 2. So address if you think the Knicks do. If Brunson's not hitting late like he wasn't against the Lakers, boy, they go dry fast. They go dry fast. Now, Randall didn't play, but I don't think OG or Randall are elite scorers per se. Is there a guy in the league that you say, you know what? I thought it was Karl Anthony Towns. I was kind of in that for a while. Is there a guy that you would like for that role?
Patience is the perfect way to put it, because they could have jumped on Donovan Mitchell. And now it's one of those things where it's at the time of the trade, we didn't realize Brunson was this good. So maybe internally they were like, Brunson's our guy. And maybe that was some of the reasoning behind it. But the point is waiting ended up being smart, because then Jalen Brunson popped, and now they can kind of be more patient in terms of waiting for who that next guy is. I thought the OG Anunoby trade was genius, because it didn't waste any sort of super legitimate asset in terms of their pursuit of an eventual star. I think one of the reasons why that Laker game looked the way it did is the Knicks are very much like a physically imposing team. They are very much like a power, beat you up for 48 minutes, classic Tom Thibodeau type of team, right? And when you take OG and Julius out, they just become small really fast, especially with Mitchell Robinson out of the lineup because he's been injured, although he might come back before the end. But this won't come as any secret to anybody who's listened to you and me talk about this before, but we're both really high on Jalen Brunson. And I think yes, Jalen Brunson has entered into that conversation with the best guards in the league. I think he's just on that tier.
Yes,
we're on
absolutely.
an extended stretch now where he, not only that, he's improving. And to take it even a step further, look at the playoffs last year. He straight up outplayed Donovan Mitchell head to head and won a series. And he went
I think, frankly, Jayson, I think he's a better
I
player
think
than
he is
Donovan
too.
Mitchell. He's not quite. I don't think he's quite. I shouldn't even say this anymore. I got to get over this. I think he's a better leader. I think he plays with a very steady temperament. I know exactly what I get from Jalen Brunson every game I watch him. Donovan, I get stretches where he just like forgets his teammates. I think Brunson is a top. You can name it, but I think New York, loud. He's classic Villanova. Tunes out the noise, coachable, leader, grown up, defends. Like, I'm sorry, but I think he's terrific. I love him.
To Donovan Mitchell's credit, he's having the best season of his career as well. The Cavs are literally the 2 seed. He's having the best defensive season he's had of his career. So I want to give Donovan Mitchell some credit, but I agree with you. Jalen Brunson is a better basketball player than him. But then he also went toe-to-toe with Jimmy Butler. The reason why they couldn't beat the Heat last year was Julius Randle was a complete non-factor in that postseason run. Now, in his defense, he was hurt. He had hurt his ankle right before the playoffs and was pretty beat up throughout that playoff run. But to your point, the Knicks have already shown us they can make some noise with just Jalen Brunson. So you can imagine what a number 2 would do for them. Now, the question is who? The guy that I know that they've been waiting on is Joel Embiid, but I do get somewhat concerned about with his injury history now. Like, here we are again with him with his knee struggling to make it through a regular season. But I think Joel Embiid is a guy they've had their eyes on. I think if the Lakers just absolutely like flounder this year, like just an absolute disaster end of the season, I put like a 5% chance that someone like LeBron could potentially either opt out of his deal this summer and sign there on like a mid-level exception, or opt in and do the James Harden where basically you opt in and ask for a trade and then try to do that. Because I look at LeBron James as basically, even at this phase of his career, just a way better version of Julius Randle, which kind of is a shoe-in fit to that position. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, but I think when it comes to the Knicks, patience has been the name of the game. Jalen Brunson has bought them the ability to be good while they wait for the right guy. But at the end of the day, there's no reason to jump at anything unless it is I wouldn't trade for a single guy unless he was better than Jalen Brunson. It literally is that simple to me.
Yeah, I think Brunson's the future of the Knicks. And there's a lot of people that are, you hear this. I think it was said about Jalen Brunson. He's a little guy. You don't win championships with little guys. And the NBA is getting bigger. I mean, there's a certain recent formula size in the league. But I got to tell you, as the league gets younger, I think there's an increasing value in maturity and leadership as the league gets younger. It's why LeBron is so valuable. And I think Tatum in New York, you can get lost in that city. I mean, that city beats guys up. Like, if you're not, I mean, I remember guys like Jeremy Shockey. I mean, that's why the great Jeremy Shockey was a great New York Giant, just not ready for the city quite, right? If you go to the history of New York, go look at their stars. Jeter, Aaron Judge, Eli Manning. What's the theme? Go home, all about the sport, grown-ups with the media, good background, adult, relationships with family. It's funny. Jeter, close to his family. Eli Manning, Brunson's dad in the NBA, Aaron Judge. A lot of times they're small town guys. If you come to New York as a star, A-Rod, you're a big free agent, and you get all this expectation, it eats you up. Jalen's the opposite. Cast off for Dallas. All he has to do is prove stuff like Villanova. He is your classic. I mean, Eli Manning went to Ole Miss. Jeter struggled in the minor leagues. Who's Aaron Judge? He's from Fresno. New York has a prototype. You're a little overlooked, undervalued, good background, family, college. I think the league's getting so young that these older players that can bring maturity to me, Jayson, I mean, it's like I say about LeBron. It's like LeBron, it could be he's like a coach, general manager, star on the floor. He's thinking about who should I have relationships with? Who can I elevate? Who should be on the floor with me? I mean, he's thinking through every possession and every game. I don't know. I just can't say enough about Brunson. I think he is New York's next star. I love him. I think he's the best quarterback in that city.
To his credit too, like, he signed up for this. Like, the Mavs, it was a little different in the annual value, but the total contract value that the Mavs offered him was pretty close to what the Knicks offered him. He straight up said, I want it. I want the pressure. I want, like, he signed up for what New York brought to the table, and he's not just thrived in that environment, he's completely exceeded expectations. We have a couple of big Knicks fans that help produce Hoops Tonight, and I talk with them about this behind the scenes. And it's crazy how that one singular signing transformed the entire landscape of the Knicks' future. Because they got, like, think about Jaylen Brown just signed a deal where in the final year he's going to make like 70 million. Okay. And Jalen Brunson's making in the 20s, and he's giving you superstar production. Like it's crazy what that one move has done for that franchise.
Let's go back to the West Coast and the Warriors. Klay Thompson, end of games, being benched. Kuminga now is starting to really play well. Not exactly sure why it took so long. Did Chris Paul start the unlocking? Has Steph Curry? I don't know. A lot of times we forget these guys come into the league at 19. It just takes a long time to get your footing. I don't care if you're a podcaster, a broadcaster, a basketball player. It's just a lot of reps. You got to be on the treadmill in games. So I've said before, I would move everybody but Steph and Draymond, and I think I'm going to add Kuminga to that. So look at their current state. Can they make a move? Do you disagree? Would you, I mean, nobody's moving Steph. Would you move Draymond? Would you move Kuminga? What's the future look like for them?
So it's funny because like a month ago, it was leaning heavily towards a Kuminga trade. To give you an idea of just how crazy this Kuminga stretch is, he had never in his entire career had back-to-back 20-point games, ever, not once. And then he notched off like 8 of them in a row. like he in his last 10 games is averaging 25 points on 61% shooting from the field. Yeah. Like he's on an incredible run, flashing like true superstar upside. And so like a month ago, I was actually pitching on my show. I was like, call the Nets and be like, here's Jonathan Kuminga, Andrew Wiggins, and Moses Moody. Give me Mikal Bridges, like a legit number 2 for Steph, and Dorian Finney-Smith. That way we have some 2 really versatile two-way forwards to put between Draymond and Steph and Klay and go make another run at this thing. Kuminga's made that not an option anymore. Like he's so damn good that you can't afford to let go of that upside. Here's the problem. He's 21. So like we talked about last year in the finals, Michael Porter Jr. is 25 and he struggled on that stage. It is very much a man's game when you get to the later rounds of the NBA playoffs. And so here's the thing, like I feel more sure than ever that Kuminga has star upside, but I also, everything about NBA history tells me that he's not going to push Steph into title contention this year either. And so they're kind of in this weird thing where it feels like a gap year in a lot of ways, because they can look to make a move. I know they've looked to move Andrew Wiggins. I'm sure they've looked at all these sorts of ancillary moves, and they may still make a move for like a Dorian Finney-Smith from the Nets and just like throw like Moses Moody and another one of their smaller contracts that way for a veteran forward. They might call Orlando and get a backup center or something along those lines, like a Wendell Carter Jr. Who knows? But none of those guys are really transforming their outlook within the scope of this season. I think like in a lot of ways, especially with Steph only being 35, and Steve Kerr basically said this in his presser the other night. He goes, we're not going to get anything better in the trade deadline than Chris Paul coming back to shore up the bench, then Gary Payton coming back to shore up their perimeter defense. And then Jonathan Kuminga's rise is an influx of talent in its own way. And they're actually starting to trust him a little bit more at the end of games. Steph, in a big possession against Brooklyn last night, just threw the ball to Kuminga in the post and got out of the way. And he drew a foul, got to the foul line. He's actually been really gifted at getting defenders out of position and getting to the foul line this year. So like, it's weird because in a weird way, it kind of turns this year into a gap year because I don't think they have enough, but Kuminga's upside is more than enough to make up for that in the big picture.
Yeah, and I mean, again, he's 21. I think we forget college football players come with 3 to 4 years. They're on a college campus. These kids, you put them in the NBA, they can't go to the hotel lobby bar. They're kids. It just, and then you bring them in, Jayson, and they're not getting any real game time minutes. So they're not, in the NFL, even a rookie who's kind of a miss, he's on the field, he's on special teams. So you can only do so much with practice in your 8 preseason games. So I have a soft spot for like the Kumingas when especially they run a system, that catch and react system, that is not for 19-year-olds. Like it's just, it eats people up. So to me, Kuminga's always looked the part. Length, twitchiness, vertical, hungry. It's just a matter of time. Wiseman, I always thought was a weird fit. I don't think Kuminga's a weird fit at all. I think he fits. I just think he's a kid. And this is, I mean, you're talking about a sophisticated offense that's almost European the way it plays. It's functioning. I mean, D'Angelo Russell came there and had years in the league. They spit him out. They were just like not interested. The guys that have worked, Iggy, Bogut, like older Wiggins, older veteran players that can come in and find a spot. So I'm glad to see sort of Kuminga flourishing because I do think he looks the part. I think he's a really special athlete. Let's go back east to the Sixers. I'm zigzagging here, but if for our podcast audience, I want both coasts. I don't want to bore you with too much left or right coast. So I defend the NBA on the Joel Embiid injury. First, it was random. A guy fell on his knee. It happens. Secondly, the NBA didn't want to create this structure where you have to play 79% of your games. They didn't want to do it. They created it because when the TV contract is up, advertisers came to them and said, yeah, it'd be nice if Giannis was available for the Saturday night game. We're paying, $800,000 a commercial. And it became sort of a 3-year load management pattern, which there's no data to suggest that it makes you better. We've learned that this year, that the load management's a lot of nonsense. So the league says, okay, we're a players league, but we need you to play more games. So, you can argue, well, Embiid shouldn't have been playing, but Embiid missed his first 2 years because of injuries. He's had chronic injuries, as many bigs do. It was going to happen. He's been hurt every year. So I'm not going to blame the league on this. But we got into this discussion the other day, and the name I threw out, because I'm old, somebody said, who is Embiid if he never wins a title? Because all the bigs have dominated. I watched my first NBA game in 72 with Wilt. Titles. Kareem, titles. Shaq, titles. Akeem, titles. Duncan, big, titles. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, is he Ewing? Bob Lanier, who, again, at my age, was a dominant big, showed up in Bud Light or Miller Lite commercials, whatever it was. But I think that's what Embiid is. I think you have to look at him like Ewing. And Ewing got to 2 finals. You have to look at Embiid and say, listen, injuries, weird teammates, but I can't make him a top 30 player ever. He statistically great. He's the closest thing to Shaq. But for bigs, in a sport where you have a genetic advantage, you're 7'2", like I'm going to hold you kind of accountable for trophies. They've never been to the conference finals. We always bang on quarterbacks that don't win Super Bowls, but there's limitations on what you can do with 22 guys on the field. I want my bigs to win trophies. Is that a fair criticism of Embiid? He's not a top 30 player. He's just a top 30 talent.
Yeah, well, he was having one of the best regular seasons that we've ever seen before he got hurt this year. But he was also having one of the best regular seasons we've ever seen last year. And then the knee started to break down, got to the postseason, and his jump shot started missing. And then all of a sudden, everything kind of fell off for him. He kind of reminds me of that conversation we were having earlier involving Jayson Tatum and Anthony Edwards, where he has attached a good amount of his success to jump shooting. To Nikola Jokic's credit, most of his shot making is little push shots and hook shots that are around the basket, which have more playoff resiliency, so to speak. It just translates better to that phase. Last year, Joel Embiid knocked down all of those little face-up jab step jumpers in the regular season, and then he couldn't make them over Al Horford, and all of a sudden the bottom fell out for him. So I think it's important to acknowledge the injuries, and some of that's outside of his control. Some of that also is kind of historically, not exactly the most shocking thing in the world for a player his size to kind of encounter some recurring injuries on that front. I think the tougher question is, as it pertains to the NBA regular season, is you might have to super load manage Joel Embiid from now on. You might have to literally hold him down to 50 games in a season and never let him play more than 3 times in a week, or do whatever it is you've got to do to maintain his knee. Because if the issue is he's hurt every year in the playoffs, then you have to find a way to get him there. You have to find a way to get him there. And you know what? That might involve not chasing 70 points against the Spurs. That might involve taking more nights off along the way. And as far as the 65 game limit thing goes, because our colleague Draymond Green came out critical of it the other day too. To me, it's kind of misdirected criticism in the sense that I think a limit like that makes some sense. It's an award. It's a regular season award. You should participate in the regular season if you're going to get that award. The bigger issue is if you don't let the press affect your salary. Take that part out. That's the part I don't understand. Make it so that the people voting on the award aren't directly affecting your ability to negotiate your salary. That's where the issue is, because I want players to play more frequently, but I don't want them to play on a bum knee for money. That's where it becomes an issue.
So here's my thing, Jayson. If I said to you, listen, I'm not going to screw with your base salary, Jayson, at the volume. I'm not going to screw with your fame, your personal life. I'm not going to screw with your social media money, your shoe money. But your bonuses, you have to hit 88 podcasts a year. I don't think that's outrageous. I mean, if Fox came to me, Colin, we're not going to screw with your salary, your social, the volume, but that $600,000 bonus a year, you got to work 211 days on the year. That's all the NBA is saying. We don't want to touch any of your money. And these guys now make social, shoes, overseas advertisements. You're not getting the bonus. You're not getting the plaque money. We're out on that. I think that's incredibly reasonable. Okay, now this isn't because I love the NBA, and I pivot every year I would say mid to late January. I kind of pivot to the NBA. And I'm so deep into college and pro football stuff. I just can't do it. And so over the last, I would say 2 weeks, now I'm watching a game a night, sometimes 2 a night. So 2 things can be true. As a sport in America gets more international, the quality of the sport is better, but it doesn't help attendance or ratings because the sport becomes less domestic and less recognizable. So hockey and baseball and now the NBA are much more international. Arguably best players now, international players. Certainly in the NBA, we're on a heater now, about 4 or 5 years, all the MVP, SGA, Luka, Embiid, Giannis, Wemby by next year late.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jokic. So that I don't worry about the NBA in terms of stability, aesthetic. Some have criticized the way it looks. I don't worry about that. Playoffs come, mid-range basketball comes right back. Guys need buckets. But I do think in terms of ratings, I think the NBA, to get the $75 billion they want, is going to have to spread it out. It'll be less dependable on one big significant network. It's getting more international, and unless you follow European leagues, which people don't unless they're diehards, you're not going to really see them in March Madness. They're going to go to bad teams, finally make an imprint in the playoffs. Wemby by year 3. Now, Wemby, again, is already iconic, it feels like. But that the NBA will be less viewed going forward. The basketball will be better. The playoffs will be intense, but it will be thin. It will be international like hockey and baseball. I mean, hockey looks so much better today than 10 years ago. It's so much faster. I mean, baseball's insane. Ohtani is significantly better than Babe Ruth. The quality of the NBA it's off the hook. It's just, I mean, the reason you can't stop anybody is because 7-footers can pull up for threes. You have to defend them. So there's no bigs in the paint, and you don't have a hand check, so you can't stop anybody. There's last night, Hawks Clippers. It's 300 points. Guys were trying. There's nobody in the basket.
So much skill.
Plumlee's the Plumlee is a rare guy that doesn't shoot a 3. It's like when you see Plumlee, it's like, a 1980s player. I can guard the basket. So the way I look at the NBA, I do worry about, if we're going to talk about ratings, I just think in a more distracted society, it's not going to be a great ratings league. It's going to be a great talent league. Is that a reasonable appraisal going forward?
I 100% agree with you. I think they could lose ground even on on those like specific TV ratings numbers, because I think attention span is getting less and less, and the league is becoming more and more of an inventory sport. Like, they're adding the in-season tournament, they're adding the play-in tournament. It is very much like you're not getting like, I saw the number from the AFC Championship game. It was like half a Super Bowl. You know what I mean? Like, it's like you're not getting those kinds of numbers from an NBA slate where it's like the Lakers play the Nuggets, TNT major game on Thursday. Kind of a big game too. Like, the Lakers are on a 3-game winning streak. Like, they beat Denver on Thursday. Kind of changes the tone and tenor of their season in so many different ways. They also could lose by 40 and it could mean nothing. because that's just the reality of the way the NBA season is set up. And so to me, I look at it more optimistically, just in the sense that I don't ever really see the NBA as being the huge, gigantic rating draw in a singular contest the way that the NFL is. It is an inventory sport. And I think that expands to the global potential too. Just the ability to earn, little bits and pieces of income from a ton of different sources rather than these big singular events, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I also I feel the people a lot of the people are intellectually dishonest. If you don't like the NBA, keep it to yourself. I love the NBA, and my criticisms are based on I love it. Here's what I see. So I've watched the same number of NBA for as long as I can remember. I watched football until about mid-January. February starts. I start getting into it, and I'll take a vacation for a week after the football season, where I'll kind of unplug from sports. I come back and I'm into the NFL free agency and the NBA, and I'm watching a game or two every night. So and I think the quality is off the hook. But I do think international players have a couple of advantages. They get into those academies and play against older men early. They don't have the distractions of our domestic players. They don't. They're just over there in Lithuania working on hoops, playing against older men. They don't have the social media platforms like we do over here. They have them, but they're not. America's different.
NIL money.
It's just we're so starstruck. Yeah. So they have, and so our guys come in distracted. A Ja Morant, Zion, they're stars when they're like 19 years old. Meanwhile, Wemby can come in here and frankly kind of hide, except for diehards. Giannis sort of hid for 4 years. Jokic absolutely hid for 5. So our guys can't hide. Ja Morant comes in, he's a star. Zion's a star. So I think there's some advantages to being the international player. I don't think the AAU system, big picture, makes our players better. I think it makes them something. I'm not sure what it is. Steve Kerr, guys like that. But I don't think the NBA, they're going to get their money. We all need content. We all need content. I just saw Fox, ESPN, Warner Brothers just started a new streaming service. So it's like, listen, the games are going to be played. And the reason they're doing that so they can afford other sports to go up against Apple and Amazon. But I think the league's fine. But I think what's happened, Jayson, is everything outside of the NFL is niche. By the way, everything in Canada outside of hockey is niche. Everything in England outside of the English Premier League is niche. You just have to own it. It's okay. Every country has the sport. Cricket is the national pastime in England. Nobody watches it. All right. It's a soccer country. So I think the NBA is in great shape because I do believe, just like a podcast or a radio show, if your content's good, you're fine. Whatever's happening to the platforms, the content of the NBA is really good. So it's fine.
It's built for social media. The highlights are completely insane. It can be digested in smaller portions. As a matter of fact, like to your point, it's like the NBA is awesome at everything except for the big singular TV event. That's kind of like their biggest weakness in so many ways, even extending into the NBA playoffs. I mean, you and I watched the Lakers last year, literally deliberately punt games in the playoffs. Like they went through Memphis and Golden State in the exact same pathway. They were like, win game 1, who cares game 2? Win game 3 and 4, who cares game 5? Like there's just so much less urgency on a night-to-night basis. And I don't even think that can be recreated. It's not possible. I mean, the NFL's urgency extends into the regular season. It's the craziest thing. It's appointment television. I have all my family and friends. Very few of them watch NBA basketball. All of them watch the NFL. It is so much more culturally resonant. And my thing is like, I'm not of the opinion that the NBA should even be compared to the NFL. The NFL is like an entirely different entity. But the NBA in and of its own kind of self is succeeding in a lot of different ways. And I think it's getting better. I think you mentioned the the playoffs, when you get to the playoffs and things kind of get better. That's the interesting thing to me, is like officiating to me is one of the bigger issues in the NBA. And then we get to the playoffs and they kind of get it right. Even on that front, I feel like I'm kind of nitpicking. So like, I'm generally an NBA optimist. I'm just a realist in the sense that they'll never, ever compete with the NFL.
Well, listen, I'm at FS1. It's number 2 to ESPN. It's a very good life. There's so many advantages to not being the NFL. The scrutiny in the NFL, game to game, is insane. They flush out 7 coaches a year. I mean, a quarterback basically gets to Thanksgiving of his second year. And if you're not good, upstairs,
They
they're
bail
moving
quickly.
on.
Yeah.
I mean, Zion has had a weight issue for 4 years, and they're still in on him. So there's advantages of being two. A lot of people at Pepsi made a lot of money. I think, to your point, I don't think you worry about anything other than I will say I've always believed that college basketball has a place in the NBA. I think you can kind of I wouldn't know Zion without him. It's for the casual fan. You meet these stars in March, and it's like, oh my God, I want to watch Zion. He doesn't play at Duke. He's just another Jalen Green.
Just another guy.
I mean, the average fan has no idea who Jalen Green is. So my only knock on Adam Silver is I wish he would just say to college basketball, hey, it's kind of a microwavable version of us. You get 3 weeks where everybody watches the sport. Then you wrap your arms around Zion and college basketball, and you can get some of those college basketball people that feed into the NBA. I've never thought listen, you can make an argument. The more popular your college sport is, the more popular the league is. So college football is number one, NFL. Number two is college basketball, NBA. Number three is the College World Series, baseball, 4, and then college hockey, right? Like, so, I mean, if you look at it, the more popular your minor league system is, it absolutely is a push into your major league platform. So I don't know. I think the NBA is
Did
fine.
you like the in-season tournament? I thought it was so
great.
good.
I don't understand the pushback.
It was amazing. Adam Silver's batting 1,000.
First of all, if you're upset about Taylor Swift or purple basketball courts, get a life. Like, who gives a shit? Secondly, there's no question when I watch those games. I mean, LeBron was, first of all, he shot 57%. He was all in. So when your stars buy in, I'm like, okay, the Lakers played like it was playoff basketball. LeBron in his 20th year or 19th year. So again, people are nitpicking. I thought the in-season tournament, I'm not saying it's a home run, stand-up double, quality of it. I mean, Indiana was playing their arse off. Lakers were playing their butt.
They felt like playoff games.
Bought into it. I thought they bought into it way more than I would have. First I thought this is hokey. And then I watched like my second game on the court, and I'm like, these guys are playing. This is like, what was it, December? I'm like, or November. I'm like, these guys are all out.
Yeah, it was exactly the tent pole that the regular season needed, because like the NBA season, it's kind of like you go through 2/3 of it, and then there's the trade deadline, then there's like the stretch run, but it's almost like a big sink in the middle there. And sometimes like Colin, I don't blame you for not watching the NBA in December and January. It can be not only can it be a little boring, it can also give you a lot of really fake results. Like the Utah Jazz went and won a bunch of games in a row in the middle of January. You know, like this is the time of year where like youth and athleticism kind of rises to the surface in so many different ways. And the NBA needed something, a tent pole between the start of the season and the trade deadline. And that's what the in-season tournament served as, is a breakup of monotony in so many different ways.
Also, the NFL's taken away their number one marketing day, Christmas, to some degree. So the NBA is like, okay, if you're going to take that away or minimize it, then we're going to create an in-season tournament before you get to your tournament. So it's all, listen, the NFL has always been playing around with the calendar. I think Adam said, okay, you're going to F us on Christmas, then we're going to create urgent. By the way, some of those playing games got numbers. These commissioners used to be buddies. Now you're all fighting for Amazon money. Nobody's buddies anymore. So the NFL moved free agency, moved into Christmas, and the NBA says, so we're going to create urgency before. I thought it worked. And also, the NBA has always been about the trade deadline on. It's in my, I mean, everybody's at 50 games now. So you get to about game 55, 60, everybody tightens everything up. The rotations get tightened up. You coach with an eye on the playoffs. I think we're going to have a great stretch run. I think Boston and Denver are the best teams. Neither has a good bench. And I think there's some Milwaukee's, Lakers, Phoenix, Oklahoma City, Minnesota. Can't wait to watch it. Jayson Timpf, Hoops Tonight, 50 minutes. We'll do more of this stuff. It's great seeing you. You're crushing. You're going to see a lot of Jayson stuff on my feed now as I kind of go heavy football. And now the NBA is getting good. And I'll tell y'all, say what you want. Give the Clippers a chance. If you're listening to this podcast, it is beautiful basketball. It is no high usage rate, tremendous movement. Next time we'll talk Oklahoma City Thunder. We're not ignoring Denver, Minnesota, but watch the Clippers play if you're a casual. That is good basketball. That is beautiful basketball. Ball movement, shot makers, shot creators, mid-range, post, inside, transition. It's great. Final thoughts?
Colin, I just wanted to say congrats to you on 3 years with the volume. It's crazy because like a year ago, you and I had a similar conversation about how crazy the growth has been. And even in the years since, it's been even crazier. I just have to say, obviously being a part of it has been an honor, but like getting to see what you've built and from what it was at the beginning to what it is now, it's just incredibly impressive. And I just want to say congratulations.
Well, you're really valuable to us. And I mean, I think the thing we lean into some gambling, NBA, NFL, and strong opinions. And you're such a unique voice in basketball. You know, we got Jenkins and Jones, who culturally are so important to us. Draymond Green, the player. And I don't think there's anybody in the country that breaks it down like you. I think you give people a really data-driven, smart, former player context that matters. It's not, you know, listen, I get called a hot take guy, but I've said before, I can't watch every game. I've got to cover all these sports, and I'm going to give you broad views of stuff. You really dig deep. I think it's necessary, and I think you're the best in the country at it, and I love it. So good
Good to see
seeing
you
you,
too,
buddy.
Colin. Looking forward to next time.
Hoops tonight. Jayson Timpf, money at the volume.